Hey there, welcome back to the channel. So, let me tell you something that a lot of people don't realize until they are maybe knee deep in starting a nonprofit. Starting a nonprofit it isn't just about passion, it's not just about a cause, and it's definitely not just about you as the nonprofit founder. There is a group of people, often behind the scenes, who have more power than you think, and that is your board of directors. If you don't understand how a nonprofit board works, you can build something beautiful but still lose control over it. So let's talk about what a nonprofit board actually is, what they do, and the difference between the board and the CEO. Because just in that power dynamic and that relationship dynamic, many nonprofit founders get it really twisted on how that relationship works. So let's dive right in. So, what is a nonprofit board of directors? At the most basic level, a nonprofit board of directors is the governing body of the nonprofit. They are not the volunteers, not in a casual sense. They're not just only supporters, and they're not just advisors. These are people who are legally responsible for the organization. That means if something goes wrong financially, strategically, or even ethically, those people who sit on that board, they are responsible for that. They are being held accountable. So think of them as the protectors of your nonprofit's mission. They are there to make sure that the organization is doing what they said it would do. They are keeping within their mission, that the money is being used properly, the organization is operating in the best interest of the public because nonprofits, they are not owned. They are, they're not businesses. They don't have shareholders. So the board exists to represent the public trust. So now let's just go a little bit deeper as far as what the purpose of the board is. Because the board, there's several things that the board does, but one of them is to protect the mission. The board is constantly asking, is this aligned? Usually, when a CEO or an executive director brings in a new initiative or bring in new ideas for the nonprofit, the board has to ask questions as far as does it actually align with the organization? They're asking questions like, is this what we said as a nonprofit we will be doing? Are we drifting into another lane or is there mission creep going on? Because it's so very easy for organizations to slowly become something completely different than what they started out as. And the board just keeps that constant alignment in the back of their minds when working with the CEO. Additionally, the nonprofit board members, they set the direction for the nonprofit. The board is focused on the big picture, the higher level things, tasks, strategies. That's where those people are working on. They're not asking, oh, what are we posting on Instagram today? They are asking more so, what is the nonprofit going to look like in 3 to 5 years? What does growth look like? More importantly, what does our impact look like? They approve strategic plans and help shape the future of the organization. Another aspect of their role is they are the ones who are overseeing the money. This is not optional when it comes to a nonprofit board. This is a core responsibility. They are the ones who are approving budgets, they're reviewing the financials, they're ensuring transparency and compliance. Because at the end of the day, this is other people's money. Again, this is not a business. This is not where you're selling and providing services and getting those things and dividing it out to the shareholders. These are people who are donating money, getting a tax benefit from that donation because they believe in your mission, what you said you would do with it. And if you are a nonprofit taking money to help students with their education and you're using it to fund vacations for your staff or for your executive leadership, that is not what the donations were curated for. So the board should at that point step in situations like that. But again, the board represents the public's trust in the organization. They are the public in a sense, and so they are the ones who, again, if there is malfeasance or if there is any kind of embezzlement or any type of funny money business happening behind the scenes, they are the ones, if they do not um, correct it, do a course correction, whether that's firing the CEO or whatever the case may be, they are legally responsible. Whoever's name is on that the updated paperwork for the nonprofit that gets sent in every year, if they're whoever's names are on that document, um, those are the ones who are going to be held liable for this. And so that means in some cases that if you're serving on a board who is being accused of any type of malfeasance with money, people can go directly after you and your own assets, depending on, especially like again, if the board or the nonprofit doesn't have um, D&O insurance and different things like that. So don't want to get too complicated and all that, but I just want people to understand, especially if you are even approached about serving on a board, it's not just about going to fancy events and being seen everywhere. You do have a role, you do have an important job to oversee the mission, the financials, the CEO, which we'll talk about next. But there's so many things that are involved than just you showing up in a fancy cocktail dress for a gala or a fundraiser. Another aspect of the board's responsibility is the hiring and the managing of the CEO. Um, and in this video, I'm going to be using CEO and executive director interchangeably, but they're the same. I'm just using different words. However, I will say this is probably one of the most important roles of the board. This is the board does not manage staff. Staff is managed by the CEO or executive director. The board manages just one person, and that is that CEO. They hire them, they evaluate them annually. There should be an annual evaluation for your CEO or executive director. They should be supported by the board. The board should actively, a successful executive director is a successful board and vice versa. So you want to make sure you're investing and you're helping your leader of your nonprofit be successful. And in the unfortunate case that you may need to replace them, that is also your role as the board. You may have to go out and do a search for a new CEO. But that is the role of the hiring and the management. So the important thing that I want you to note, especially if you are a nonprofit founder, you're thinking that, oh, this is my nonprofit just because you started it. I want you to understand that the board has the authority. That is the proper chain of command. You could have started this nonprofit from the ground up. You probably are the one who recruited those same board members, but it is the duty of the board members, if they determine that you are not the best fit for that nonprofit at the time, like when they're trying to grow and do different things and they end up replacing you, there is nothing you can do about that. That's the responsibility, again, of the board. Just because you founded something, is again, this is not a business, this is a nonprofit. This is where you are serving in the interest of the public. And again, if the board deems that you are no longer fit to serve in that role, they do have the right to replace you. So don't be shocked about this. All right. But another thing that nonprofit boards do, they fundraise and they open doors for the nonprofit. Board members are expected to bring value, and that can look like a variety of different things. That can mean donating, connecting the organizations to resources, and advocating for them in rooms that the nonprofit um, leadership may not be in. So, depending, especially if you're in different industries or in different sectors in the community, making sure that people are aware of what your nonprofit does and what you do and what you do as a board member and what the staff does, things like that. So that way you're opening up doors and making connections and building a network for that nonprofit as well. And lastly, another thing that a nonprofit does, or sorry, board of directors does, is they will ensure compliance and integrity. They make sure that the organization follows the laws, operates ethically, and maintains credibility. Again, especially with those first two things, the board of directors is responsible for that nonprofit. So if they are not following laws and they are not acting ethically, it is their responsibility to act and do something about that. So I always like to mention to people to don't just casually accept invitations to join a nonprofit board because there's a lot of things that you really have to do, as I just mentioned. Um, if there's anything that kind of goes wrong with that nonprofit, you are on the hook for that. And there are so many questions that you should be asking the nonprofit before you join the board so that way you have a clear understanding of what your expectations are or what their expectations are, what you are responsible for, all different things. And so I'll have a video coming out about that in the next few days. But again, I would say do not casually just accept board member um, board member invitations without asking questions, without meeting key people, and understanding what your role will be in that. So let's move on and talk about probably one of the biggest things, especially as a nonprofit, um, like a nonprofit professional, that I'm constantly asked about when it comes to boards and the CEO and all that, and that is the relationship between the CEO and the board. So this dynamic, it truly can make or break nonprofits because the relationship between the board and the CEO is so important. The simplest way to understand this is the board focuses on the what and the why, and the executive director focuses on the how. The board, they are thinking about vision, strategy, oversight, sustainability. They meet periodically, and they are not in the day to day weeds of actually operating the organization. Now, the CEO, executive director, they are in it every single day. They are managing staff, they're running programs, they're executing strategy, and they're making operational decisions. They are basically taking the board's strategy and turning it into real, tangible work. That is the relationship between the board and the CEO. The power dynamic that you're looking at is the CEO reports to the board and not the other way around. And this is where, again, I think a lot of founders get really caught off guard by this because they think that they own, just because they founded the nonprofit, that they own it and they're responsible for it. And no, it's the board, again, that really runs the organization and sets the strategy and the higher level um, sustainability and future goals for the organization. And so it's just really something that nonprofit founders have to kind of wrap their heads around. And when they don't, things go wrong. So let's talk about the different ways how this relationship can become imbalanced. Because again, on paper, it all makes sense. It seems like it makes sense, but in practicality and reality, it it can go off the rails and quickly. So let's talk about when the board is overstepping their boundaries. You will see things such as board members trying to manage staff, so they are jumping over the CEO and communicating and directing staff to do things. You will also see them getting involved with daily operations. They'll be just coming into the office, telling staff what to do, how to do it, when to do it. You'll also see the board micromanaging the CEO, telling them how to do their job. When this happens, there's so much confusion, there's so much burnout, and there's just terrible power struggles that end up happening with that. And again, the board should stay in their lane, and they are the ones who operate with the strategy. They're at the higher level of thinking when it comes to the nonprofit, but they are not in the day to day operations of it. They should not be in that space. So now let's talk about on the flip side when the CEO oversteps their boundaries. When they are not communicating with the board, when they're being very hush hush and secretive, they should have open communication with the board. The board should never be caught unaware or off guard about anything the nonprofit is doing because the CEO should have communicated that information. The CEO, when they're making decisions, like important decisions, all alone without consulting their board chair or the board in its entirety, and also ignoring governance. When you are ignoring the directives of the board and just doing things your own way, that just leads to misalignment, again, confusion, and now you have risk when it comes to the nonprofit that the board has to be worried about because you have a CEO who has essentially gone rogue, and you have mistrust between the two parties because the board feels like they're out of the loop. And now you also have instability because if there is a clash between the CEO and the board the board is probably going to get sick and tired of that CEO's antics eventually, and they're going to end up canning them, thrusting the organization into a period of a little bit of instability as far as who their leader is. So it's so important to, again, really understand how everyone should be in their own separate lanes, but you're going in the same direction. That is what you're aiming for. But when you're going in and out of lanes, doing things you're not supposed to do, crossing over into other people's work, it's just a hot mess. So you want to avoid that by staying in your lanes. And if you have questions, ask questions. Nothing's wrong with that. But again, stay in your lane and continue going forward in the same path. So let's go to what a healthy structure will look like. The strongest organizations, they have clear boundaries, strong communication, and they also have defined roles and mutual respect. The board and the CEO just has a healthy respect with one another. Again, they're not adversarial. They all are wanting the same thing. They want the success of the organization, because the success of the organization means that they have success for their clients and the people that they serve. And the community is better for them and better for it by them being successful. So it really should be kind of like a hand in hand relationship where they're both being supported by one another. Um, the board, again, trusts the CEO to lead, and the CEO respects the board's authority, and both are aligned around the same mission. That is the goal there. Um, but I will say, when it comes to this relationship, the real issue between the two, it usually isn't bad people or bad actors. It's just really a matter of just unclear roles. So if you take nothing else from this video, if there is confusion, if you find yourself in a nonprofit and there is this weird kind of confusion going on between you and the board, if you're the executive director, it's just time to delineate some clear lines, because right now your road essentially has no lines of demarcation. No one knows where they should be. So it's just a matter of setting lines in the road so that way everyone knows where their respective lanes are. And again, that you're going in the same direction, you're singing from the same hymn books, all the whole cliche there. But that is the goal that you're looking for. And again, it's not usually bad actors. It's just people don't know. They're excited to be on the board, or they're excited to be an executive director, and they're just really gung ho for the mission and just want to do good, but they don't know how all these different things play in the larger scheme of things. So if you take nothing else from this video, like I said, a nonprofit board is not just a formality. It really is a thing that needs to be adhered by. It should be taken seriously. They are the backbone of your organization's governance, accountability, and your long-term success. If you have a great board, you're going to have typically a great CEO, and those two working hand in hand, your organization is just going to benefit greatly from those two folks, or those two organizations, or those two parties working together in tandem for the organization, for the community at large. The CEO, this is the person that is bringing the mission to life. And again, that's why you need both. You need a strong CEO, but you also need a strong board. And them working together is going to change, again, that organization and the community at large. So that is all that I have for you today. Today's affirmation: I build with clarity, lead with integrity, and align with purpose. So if you got to this point, thank you so much for watching. My name is Monie, and on this channel, I talk about anything and everything that helps you build a life that fits you and your aspirations. And I make videos here every day. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. It means a lot. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.